Time for church.
That's why I need a witness who can verify what I've seen. Not a GTI or a probe, it is a real Buick Century.
The 1989 Buick Century turns Saturday night into a school night. Because you have Sunday school tomorrow. No, you can't have a sleepover. You've got confirmation class. 89 Buick Century, the official car of... I cut out a newspaper article I want you to read. Here it is. Now you read this. It will teach you something. Buick Century. Brought to you by... this may be Grandma's last Christmas. Buick Century. No, this year is gonna be Grandma's last Christmas. 1989 was the height of the boomers' power and influence. Boomers were in their early 40s, in the late 80s, and they understood the world. The world turned according to their whims. They understood computers because floppy disks were goddamn floppy. And the HIV virus was doing the Lord's work. And this was their car, a Buick Century Custom. Yes, boomers understood this car. A 3.3-liter transverse V6 coupled to a 3-speed automatic on a column shift with no overdrive gear. It has an 85-mile-an-hour speedometer, and the air conditioning runs on R12. This was the boomers' favorite car. They understood it. The grille reminded them of war. The hood ornament reminded them that, yes, this is an American car. The badging says custom, which means diddly. The fake spoke wheels reminded them of a time before the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Fuel injection. Buick. My son's not gay. He's just shy. Buick. It's not wood. It's better than wood. Century. I'm going to live forever. I understand this world. My map light switch says map light. While it hasn't been in continuous production, the Buick Century has been around almost as long as Kirk Douglas. The first one came off the line in 1936 in an attempt to solve the Great Depression with a more modern-looking car, intended to give off the perception that the economy was on the upswing. It was an answer to the overly simplistic cars of the day, which lacked sophistication or any sense of real currency. The name Century comes from the British phrase, doing the century, which means to go 100 miles an hour. I'm pretty sure by the 50s and 60s, that became doing the ton, with the rockers and the mods and everything in motorcycle culture. Anyway, this officially marks the first bit of British slang we can mark in our notebooks for our upcoming UK trip in May, provided we're not 80 years too late on the doing the century thing being the thing that people say over there. Anyway, since Buick was designing their first car capable of going 100 miles an hour, that's the name this got. Although in Japan, it's the Buick Regal, since Toyota owns the name Century over there. And Toyota's Century is a 4-door limo that looks something straight out of Final Fantasy 15. You could just imagine the floor mats covered in hair gel and dropped loot. Just breathe in those memories of 4 dudes who are totally pegging off screen every time they go camping. By 1959, Buick moved on from the Century and renamed it the Invitica. The Century Cruiser was introduced in 1969, followed by the rear-wheel drive A-body Grand Sport from 73 to 77, and the downsized Century sedans, coupes, and station wagons of the early 80s. The commonplace sensibility that prevented the Century from competing with the more aesthetically pleasing cutting-edge models of the modern era is exactly what gave it its appeal. In 1989, you had these weird boxy-looking things like the Geo Metro and the Hyundai Excel, cars for the type of girl with an Arby's receipt, a pregnancy test, and a Claire's gift card in her purse. Well, by comparison, the Century looked downright classy. I'm a boomer, I'm 40, and I am gonna treat myself in a nice conservative way. The Century remained on the A-body platform for its big 1989 reveal, with flush headlights on the front end, along with a stand-up hood ornament, which became standard. The full-width taillights are the tell that you have an 89 on your hands, because Buick likes big butts, and they can't lie. Seriously, John Keats never wrote anything as poetic as the ass on a Buick Century. It's so well proportioned. I don't know enough math to tell you just how symmetrical vehicle this car is, but everything looks and feels like it's in perfect artistic alignment. Sure, you may get around 20 miles to the gallon because you have no overdrive gear, but now you have coil pack ignition in the new GM 3300 motor with multi-port fuel injection, and if you try hard enough, you can seat 8 people in this thing. Now, the owner says that even though the speedometer stops at 85 miles an hour, he got it to do $120 on an empty road in Mexico. For a V6 front-wheel drive sedan, doesn't accelerate quickly. Okay, so here's a start.
You can give it the beans. It's nice.
All right, there's the beans. Ugh, that seemed way high. Did that even drop down? Then we went 45. Was that in first gear?
I think it was.
Oh my goodness. We've been spoiled by Honda's V6 Accord, which embarrasses 4-cylinder tuners. The GM 3300 motor is stout, sure, but the 3-speed beef and broccoli box mutes all performance. Every motion is dampened. The steering is heavy and soft, and the brake pedal travel is a yard long, and the ride is inoffensive, like Christian comedy. No one knows you're drunk when you're driving this. That's what the Buick Century's for. This is a car for drunk driving. What you do is you drive this car to Di Mario Angelini's authentic Italian restaurant, and you eat a plate of carbohydrates and drink 3 quarts of table wine. Then you slaunder out to your 89 Buick Century Custom to meander home the back way and appear stone sober while you do it. Because you can't make jerky overcorrections in a Buick Century. This curmudgeon plows forward like a one-sided Thanksgiving political discussion. But like it or not, that's your family. This is your parents' car. Now, for those of us who have boomer parents, this was their peak of intellect and physical strength. But they put us here. We owe a lot to them, even if some of them are reaching the geriatric stage. Because with a Century, you can remember those long family road trips where all your electronics were locked in the glove box, so you had no choice but to appreciate the gorgeous, mundane scenery of the United States. Its rolling plains, its deep rivers teeming with trout, the countless farms with sluggish, foul-smelling livestock, the sprawling cities filled with sport teams internally on a rebuilding season, and the billboards for injury lawyers with fat, pink, bubbling flesh. The Buick Century might not help you communicate with God, but it'll help you communicate with America. And if you ask the Heartland, that's the same thing.
Century, let me see that perfect 8 body from 89. You're on my mind, more poetic than Keats. I'd have blown all my loans to get you over 20 mpg, possibly